loves, and welcome back to the Horus Heresy. Now, I mentioned in the last episode, Legion, that this episode would be about the book Mechanicum. However, that actually isn't the next book in the series, and there's a reason why I forgot, I can tell you. Sadly, the book we're going to be exploring today is Battle for the Abyss. As in all series like the Horus Heresy books, A, because it's so long and there are so many of them, and B, because you've got so many different writers working at once, there are going to be installments that are not as good as the others. And unfortunately, I would say that Battle for the Abyss is probably the nadir of the entire series, which is ironic. It's interesting because it's written by Ben Counter, and Ben Counter is generally one of the stronger writers in the Horus Heresy stable. He's done some fairly good stuff. Battle for the Abyss is just... it's not a good book. It is very poorly written. It feels very rushed. It feels half-baked, as though it was just sort of hurriedly rushed out to meet a deadline, to fill a gap maybe between one book and the next. It's also, the quality of the writing aside, it's also pointless. Hardly anything of note or of intrigue or of interest occurs in this book. You can completely ignore it. You can actually skip from the last book, Legion, to the next one, and you will miss nothing. You can just forget reading it, read all of the other books in the Horus Heresy, and nothing has changed. The story involves... It kind of introduces, actually, and the sad thing about it is this book is the first one that introduces certain legions in the Horus Heresy. So you've got the Space Wolves introduced here, and they're very badly written. You've got the Ultramarines introduced here, and they're very dull and boring here. You've got the Word Bearers outside of Erebus introduced, and they come across as mustachio-twirling, idiotic supervillains. You have the Thousand Sons essentially introduced here. The only good character, the only intriguing or interesting character in this entire book is a character called Motep, who is a Thousand Sun sorcerer who happens to be... He just gets swept up in events, basically, and he's kind of the hero of this book. He's actually a really good character. The rest is just fluff and filler, and it doesn't really do anything. The book does absolutely nothing. The essential story involves a ship that Lorgar has had constructed called the Furious Abyss, which is this gigantic warp-borne vessel that could never have been forged in the material universe. It's basically a Death Star. You can use it to destroy planets and whatnot, and it takes off for Macragge just as Istvan 3 is breaking out. And it's about a motley crew of Space Wolves and Ultramarines and Motep the Thousand Sun trying to stop this ship, trying to stop the Word Bearers, basically. And it just hasn't got anything going for it. It's all fluff and filler. There's nothing of note that happens, barring the introduction of this ship, because there will be, although the ship itself is destroyed at the end, there are other iterations. Lorgar actually reveals in Betrayer that he constructed 3 of the damn things. And that's about it. That is about it. None of these characters recur again. None of them are that interesting, barring perhaps Motep. And the only reason Motep works is because he is the only halfway sane or reasonable character in this entire book. All of the others, particularly the bloody Space Wolves, and this is something that is consistent throughout the Horus Heresy, regardless of who's writing them. So I would assume this is how they wanted them to be characterized. The Space Wolves come off as violent, barbaric, unreasonable thugs and bigots in this book. They respond with unthinking violence to Motep for no reason, just because he is a Thousand Sun. They almost get themselves and everyone else killed because they're so unreasonable. They're idiots. They actually the Space Wolves in this book come off as unlikable, unapproachable idiots. The Ultramarines are just dull. They're really boring, which is a shame because that's actually a stark contrast to how they come across later on. Later on, they're actually really interesting in like the Unremembered Empire stuff. Love all of that, and the Battle for Calth stuff. That's all really, really good. But the Ultramarines here are just poorly characterized. They are de facto loyalist A. They could have been. You could actually take the Ultramarines characters out and supplant them for anyone else of any other legion. It wouldn't make any difference. Zadkiel, the word bearer, who's sort of like the captain of the Furious Abyss, and his followers are idiots. They are flat out mustachio-twirling cartoon supervillains, and it's starkly contrasting to how the word bearers are portrayed in other books. Like later on when Aaron Dembski-Bowden gets a hold of them in the first Heretic, they are one of the most interesting, subtle, intriguing, and even considered legions. They are portrayed as this legion of considered philosophers and metaphysicians rather than as bigots and idiots and lunatics. Zadkiel is just an idiot. He's an absolute moron. He is this Saturday morning cartoon villain, and he's really boring. He's powerfully dull. There's a point in it where, for reasons that are way too complicated to go into, Khan the Betrayer, as in the lunatic world eater, is aboard one of the word bearer's vessels, and he is wreaking havoc, and they can't find him. Khan the Betrayer is aboard one of the word bearer's vessels and they can't find him. It's ridiculous. It really doesn't make a great deal of sense. The whole book feels forced. It feels wrong. It doesn't feel sincere. It feels like it was cobbled together to fill the gap between one Horus Heresy book and another, because it does nothing significant. It says nothing significant. It doesn't add to the story, the mythology, or anything. It's just a very boring, highly pointless piece of work. And that's a real shame. That's a real shame, because the book that introduces certain legions probably should have been a bit more significant. Later on, you will get books that include and introduce the Thousand Sons, the Space Wolves, the Word Bearers, the Ultramarines, that are really good. But here, no. My advice with Battle for the Abyss would be just don't bother. It's one of the few I would say just don't bother with, because it's not only a pointless book, it's a boring one. And that's the cardinal sin for me. It's not even entertaining on a sort of pulpy level. It's irritating. The characters are irritating. A lot of the tensions and the problems that occur in this book that actually drive the story only occur because the characters are written as the stupidest, most bigoted, ill-considered people imaginable. And that goes to the power of N for the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves are wholly unlikable in this book, as they are throughout the entire Horus Heresy series. It's not very good, sadly. And I would highly recommend just not bothering with it, because it's a badly written piece of work. Fortunately, from this point on, most of the books, even the ones that are not as good as the others, are still very serviceable and still do stuff with the mythology that they should be doing. So, next time, one of a slightly happier note than this, I'm afraid, ladies and gents. Until then, bye-bye!